Have you ever heard the term silent majority? Have you felt like you could do more? Do you have a desire to help with local politics or make a difference in how the government operates? Is it overwhelming to think about? Those questions define me. They were me, but not anymore. This podcast is about our voice, our questions, our feelings, and working together to make a difference for the future. We believe that we must fight for our liberty or lose our freedoms. Join me as I speak to our friends and neighbors, our politicians and leaders, and discover ways that we all can make a difference in the direction of the United States of America. This is Liberty or Lose. Thank you for tuning in. Well, I feel like the show is gaining some momentum. I appreciate the quick downloads on my first couple of shows and the content. And I also want to thank everybody for their questions that they've sent in, not only for myself, but for John Fuller that was on our show last week with Derek Skis. And then John Fuller, of course, has his own show. If you have not heard it, it's Life and Politics with John Fuller. You can find that on Spotify. And then Matt Regier, who I don't talk a lot about on here, we haven't had him on yet, but I do produce his show for him, and it's the 406 Political Axiom. So thank you for listening to Liberty or Lose. Today I've got a very special guest. I would say she is a fireball of energy, an amazing person with a passion. I would just say a passion for people, our Constitution, our religious freedoms, and medicine. And I've got Dr. Annie Bukacek. Is it Bukacek?
Bukacek, yes.
You told me before, and I hacked it up already. But I'm so happy for you to be here. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so appreciative, and thank you for the kind introduction.
Well, I'm just getting to know you. I've seen you speak a couple times, and when I saw you speak the other day at the school board meeting, I told my wife, Samantha, I'm like, I got to get her on my show.
All right.
And we chased you down. I think you were chasing her down, so it just worked out fabulous.
All right. Yeah, I loved what she had to say. Her testimony was excellent.
So, when I've seen you, you literally are that fireball of energy and information. And I was easily impressed with the couple times that I've listened to you speak on a variety of topics. And I know we could probably go across the board of politics and everything in between today on this show. But you've got some projects coming up, and I'd love to hear about what that project is and kind of the topic in which you'll be speaking at.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be in a documentary that's a big, major documentary. It's going to have Robert Kennedy Jr. in it, and Andy Wakefield, and Del Bigtree, and some other big names. And they've asked me to be in it too. So, and the topic is the reset and the Great Reset. And my portion is going to have to do with COVID-19 and how the COVID rollout plays into that reset. So,
in brief, in case my listeners don't know what the Great Reset is, and I don't know if you could say it in brief, but can you just say what the Great Reset is for them?
Well, they've been calling for it. The powers that be of the various organizations have been calling for it, saying that we need a global reset of the economy, and we need to, bring everything together and get rid of sovereignty of nations and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So that's very general. And
so when you talk about a Great Reset, there's many components to that, to generating the bigger picture, right? And that comes in all forms. We talked about it a little bit off air, whether it's through our religious scholars, our attorneys, our doctors. The list probably goes on, as it relates to this Great Reset and what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and one necessary portion of the Great Reset for it to be effective, for the powers that be to be effective and successful, is they have to get the people to go along with it.
Yeah,
that's in my opinion, that's one of God's laws. If we consent to this horrible stuff, that's what we get. If we stand up against it, God blesses us, and we have freedom. And so it's an essential component of their success to get people to go along with it. Mm-hmm. Free people in this country to voluntarily subjugate themselves to tyranny. And so that's they've done that very successfully this year. Or in 2020, many people continue to live in fear, and so they've succeeded in that.
It's interesting. I listened to this sermon by Jack Hibbs. He's at Calvary Chapel, Chino in California. A friend sent it to me. He talked about God calling us to blow the trumpet.
Amen.
Get on the hill, blow the trumpet for what we see and what we know, right? and what our beliefs are. If we don't blow the trumpet, then we're at fault.
That's right.
In God's eyes,
right.
right? And if you think about it, if you're hearing that trumpet, there's your message. It's time to act on it, right?
That's right.
And I want to thank you one more time for being on the show today, because this show, for me, is one way that I can blow the trumpet and start to get the word out there. And, we want to spread the word and let everybody know. I don't want to be called out for not blowing the trumpet. So thank you again for being on the show. Let's talk about your portion of this documentary coming out and what you're going to discuss as it relates to COVID-19.
There are going to be a lot of things that I'm going to discuss. They've given me over 20 questions that I need to answer. One thing I want to say before I get into that about blowing the trumpet is that we are absolutely obliged to. We have to. It is absolutely our duty from God to blow that trumpet. And if we don't, then everything that happens is on us.
Yeah.
The blood is on our hands. It's all on our hands. So we're absolutely obliged. It's our duty.
Yeah.
It's not an option. So
yeah,
I appreciate what you're doing. So there are many questions that I've been asked to discuss on this documentary, and many of them pertain to death certificates and COVID-19 and how the corruption and coercion involved with that, because that's one of my expertise. I gave a talk on that April 5th, and it went viral. It went international. I was in the Rolling Stone. Not on the cover of the Rolling Stone, but I was actually in there was an article about me in the Rolling Stone. It was a hit piece, but we'll take it.
Yeah. So
anyway, it went international. We don't know how many millions of hits there were. So death certificates is one of the things that I'm going to be discussing. The fatally flawed PCR testing is one thing that is one of my passions, so I'm going to spend a lot of time on that because it's the PCR testing is the cornerstone of this pandemic, so-called pandemic. It's the cornerstone. It's the basis for saying people are dying, and it's the basis for cases supposedly of it. And so if the cornerstone test, the PCR, is fatally flawed, that can easily be argued that this whole thing is a scam. Mm-hmm. And so that's another one of my passions. But one thing that I wasn't asked about, but I'm hoping I get a chance to talk about, and that has to do with the involvement with physicians, with the medical community, doctors and nurses, and their involvement with this and their cooperation with this charade, and why that's critically important to getting the people in general to cooperate and go along with it and give up their cherished freedoms. Because most people, I think, even if they're suspicious of the medical industrial complex, suspicious of big pharma, maybe they don't like, how much doctors make or those kinds of things. So even if they don't like the profession, maybe in general, they still generally like their own doctor, maybe love their own doctor. Mm-hmm. They trust their own doctor.
Yeah.
And so when their doctor is going along with the charade, that's going to encourage all the patients of that particular physician to go along with it as well. And so getting physicians involved in cooperating this was a critical piece of the success. And, through cross-culturally, I think it could be said, and throughout history, three of the most respected professions are clergy, teachers, and doctors. I think that it's cross-cultural.
Yeah,
and
sure.
so it was necessary for the powers that be for them to succeed in this great reset and everything that's going along with that. It was necessary for them to get those three professions on their side, and they've done it very successfully. And we've talked about the churches shutting down, pastors and priests abandoning their flock
mm-hmm.
for months at a time. Some of them are still doing that, and teachers, in this country, most children go to public schools, so their teachers work for the government. So that was already in the bag. That was easy. And then doctors, it's maybe taken a little longer to get doctors on board with it. Or that's the way it appears. But in reality, they were going along with it almost from the start.
Amazing. I want to set a tone here, and I know you've got some great materials in front of you. I don't want to say a normal person, an average person that's not involved with politics in the past, we're all busy. School moms, working dads, kids, teenagers, high schoolers, across the board. Because the lack of our involvement with politics and following along with the story and what's happening, all of a sudden, because of COVID and an incredible election cycle the last 4 or 6 years, depending on when you got involved, all of a sudden people are popping their heads out of the sand and looking around and going, wow, there is a lot to digest here. Mm-hmm. And when you mentioned the Great Reset, and you're already engulfed in everything on the news, and you're just being bombarded with information right now, and whether it's disinformation or accurate or however you perceive it, how do we, as normal, everyday people that are more concerned about getting our kids to school on time, take into consideration the Great Reset? And how do I digest and realize this is real? This is something important. This is something worth looking into and educating myself on. Now, I've done that, and the first time I heard the Great Reset term, I just thought it was a term. I didn't realize how much was behind it. So I'm just asking from your perspective, how does an average person go about comprehending something of this magnitude? Because you're talking about clergymen, doctors, teachers. We've already know that it's the politicians.
Yeah, in terms of, and back to what you were saying about how regular folks don't have time.
Yeah.
We're raising our children. We're working. We're just trying to survive. We're just trying to make it, and that's part of how the powers that be win. Because the teachers, if they get involved, if they're doing some project to support, the COVID-19 rollout, they're doing it as part of their work, and they get paid. Mm-hmm. And I know, I've been going to Helena for various bills for 12 years. And when we show up for these, liberty-oriented or pro-life bills, we are taking a day off from work to go down to Helena, whereas the ones that come against us, they're being paid for their time there. And so that is stacked against us for sure. Mm-hmm. And many families, both parents are working, and if one of the parents is staying at home, they're busy with their children and the children's activities. So we're just busy people trying to get by. And so it's a fact. It's something that we need to live with. And I think that in order to comprehend and then get involved and do what you can when you're busy just raising your family and trying to survive, it's very difficult to find the time. But I think one way to spend the time, get knowledgeable about it, and then go to school board meetings.
Yeah.
How much time did that take? It was a very long meeting. I think we were there about 3 hours. That's 3 hours. That's in a month. That's really not asking very much. People can do that. And I think what people need to understand is that if they don't get involved to the extent that they can in the future, they're not going to have free time. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be able to enjoy their kids' sports games. They're not going to have the freedom to come and go and travel and enjoy life. They're going to be enslaved if they don't do something. Yeah. And so they really need to get involved to the extent that's possible and sacrifice some things to be more involved. And the comprehension portion, that's a complex issue, because what I've noticed, and I've talked to patients about it and other friends of mine, trying to understand why it is that people of all educational backgrounds, all socioeconomic, there's a subset of the population that figured out within a month, by March or April, figured out that there's something wrong here. Yeah. There's something that's not adding up, and there's something sinister about the way it's not adding up. Look what they're doing to the old people. Look what they're doing to the children. This is not right. So there's a subset of people that figured it out back then, and those are the same ones that get it now. And so it's understandable that it could take a while to figure some things out. But by now, most people should be figuring out that this isn't quite right. I mean, if this virus was so dangerous and so horrible, wouldn't we all know people that have been hospitalized and on a ventilator and have died from it? I mean, I don't know anybody personally that's died from it, and I'm a doctor. I had one patient who was hospitalized for 2 days with COVID. Mm-hmm. I mean, wouldn't you think we would be seeing people dropping dead and we're not seeing that. And so people by now should understand that there's something sinister, something wrong. This is not adding up. And then you would think they'd want to stand up against it. And so there's